Welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast, your home for all things Chelsea FC. Nick, Dan, and myself cover all the match reviews from the latest Chelsea matches. We cover the team news and even throw you some exclusive interviews. Thank you already for being an awesome listener, and you know what? Let's jump right in. That's right, Chelsea fans, we are back. Not only is the group back, I am back, and it does feel good. Not really listening back and hearing you guys just jab me the whole time, but I totally get it. So obviously Dan and Nick are here to, probably say other things to my face now that I'm here. But before we get into that, I do want to bring in our guest, Stanford Chidge, right off the bat. Chidge, the Podfather, welcome back. We have missed you, sir.
Yeah, it's been a while, man. What have I done? Have I farted in a bad place or something? I feel like I've been ignored. I'm only pulling your leg. It's good to be back. Lovely to speak to you guys.
It is fantastic to be back. We finally saved up enough money to meet your agent fees. I heard about JK and how much that he could do for you. So you'll have to talk to him about why it's been so long. But Nick, right off the bat from @big_Nash88 on Twitter saying, how did Nick celebrate his birthday? What were his alcoholic beverages of choice for his special weekend?
That's a fantastic question. So my coworkers got me a couple bottles of liquor, one being a really nice scotch, another being my favorite bourbon. And so I celebrated with a little bit of that, but I also had a wedding this weekend. In which I drank, Chidge, I think I would have done you proud with the amount that I drank last night. And unlike Brandon, I can play through a hangover. So I'm back.
Damn, he went there.
I'm back,
he went there.
And I'm ready to go. I'm a little fuzzy up top, though. So
have you had a hair of the dog, though, mate? That's the thing.
Yeah. So I got really drunk Friday night on German beer, which just threw me for a whole loop, and then got back in with the Guinness yesterday, and then had a breakfast Guinness this morning so that I could level out. But yeah, it was. You have to do it as a pro yourself, Chidge.
Yes, indeed. I discovered on holiday in Spain last week or the week before last that the place that I stayed at, on their breakfast, basically they had a mix of English breakfast, continental breakfast, pastries, you name it. But I spied very quickly on that they also had several bottles of champagne open. So I was waking up with a glass of champagne every day. It's the only way to wake up.
That sounds like you're living the dream. You're living the high life. That's well
great.
Done. Might have to extend our trip into Spain, gentlemen, and sample it down there. That is good.
It was probably Carver, really, Brandon, but hey, it all counts.
That's why they take it out of the bottles for you, so you don't know. Exactly. Dan, jumping back in, we have more iTunes reviews this week. Again, people leaving us the 5-star love in the Apple Podcast Store.
Yeah, we're actually recording apparently on International Podcast Day, which is well themed considering we have Chidge on, a little cross the pond connection there. But we want to thank Dubba 19, Phoenix Ops, and Farkas 28, and London Hella Blue.
All right,
and then Love Seat. Some interesting review names there, but all left some 5-star reviews on iTunes, and we thank you for that. And would love to shout you out on the next podcast if you do the same. So 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Get a little shout out at the beginning of the show.
And a huge thank you to Colin, who just joined us on Patreon. Huge thank you. Your rewards will be coming soon. And a heads up to those of you who already are on our Patreon and those of you thinking about it. We're going to be adding some brand new rewards for those of you looking to join up and support us. So we want to give back essentially as much as we can to you guys who make that kind of commitment to us, to show you just how much we appreciate it. I do want to shout out, Chidge, the Chelsea FanCast Patreon page. And I would like you to tell the group, because this is something I wish we could ever do, what you did with the funds from your Patreon. A worthwhile cause.
Well, I don't know if I've actually announced it, have I, or have I?
You did, because it is going to be hung up at the bridge.
Because I'm a big mouth, basically, and I wasn't going to. It's not here yet, that's why. But no, basically, you're far more organised than me, and I kind of. It's really funny that we get. I'll give you an example. there's the Anchor thing, and then there's the Yapper thing. Well, I got emailed about those kind of things like years ago, and of course and Acast is another one. I just sit on my arse and don't do anything about it. And you guys are really good. You get on it. You're such great Americans. That's what you do. You see. I should buy you a blue cap with "Making Podcasts Great Again" or something like that. But anyway, I kind of did the whole Patreon thing as well, because I kind of thought, fuck it, why not? If people like what we do, and they want to contribute, and they're always asking how they can contribute, basically. And I've spent a fair bit of money doing this, as you guys can imagine. But I thought, the whole point of it is that you give something special back, and I've seen a lot of them, and a lot of them really, it's about premium content. And I thought, well, we do enough bloody content as it is, but maybe people can kind of get hold of me a little bit easier if they want to, which is a nice thing. And then I just had this brainwave that, we've been doing a podcast with Kerry for a year or so now. Kerry Dixon, who, for those of you who don't know, is Chelsea's third highest goal scorer, an absolute hero of mine in the 80s. And it just, I looked, looking around Stamford Bridge, and I thought, there's no banner for Kerry. There's a Drogba one, a Hazard one, a Lampard one, a Terry one, an Osgood one, a Bobby Tambling one, but there isn't one for Kerry, and I just thought, this is nuts. So I talked to some chums, the We Are the Shed boys, and of course there's some of the American guys who also help out with the banners, and they've basically knocked one up. So when they come over in October, we will have the banner ready, and hopefully we will keep it flying high at Stamford Bridge. I'm hoping that it'll go at the Matthew Harding end, because that's where I sit. But yeah, I thought a lovely tribute to Kerry, which is overdue and much deserved. A lovely kind of substantial and concrete way to thank the people that listen to the show and contribute to it by being Patreon members. And there we go. And I just thought, every time they watch a game, they'll see that banner and they'll think, yeah, I did that. And I just thought that was a really nice thing to do. So there you go.
That is so cool. And it's obviously very tangible and something they can see every other weekend and during the season. Very cool. Nick, you have your own special shout out, I see.
Yeah, really awesome situation. So my coworker Caitlin got married last night, so we were all out having as many drinks as I could have possibly had in a 3-hour span. And it just so happened that her brother is a listener of our show and came up kind of out of nowhere and ended up talking about Chelsea for a little while, which was great. And so I just wanted to shout Michael Shea out on the pod, and know that he's an avid listener of the show. And it's always, and Chidge, I'm sure you still feel this way, it's always just really humbling to meet people who listen to the show in person and kind of hear the anecdotes and listening habits and things like that. So really cool, and just want to give Michael a shout.
Absolutely right. Obviously, apart from when I've had to meet you lot, but everybody else, everybody. No, I'm only joking. Yeah, I think that's the best thing. I mean, and the interesting thing that I find is that the guys that I do the podcast with, I came from a professional TV background and all of that, so it's a bit different. But they didn't. They're just people who love Chelsea and wanted to do a show with me, and they are always utterly overwhelmed about the number of friends that they've made. I mean, a lot from America, it has to be said, that kind of outweighs many of the others, but from the States, from Australia, New Zealand, from Europe, from Asia, I mean, everywhere in the flaming world, we've had people come over and meet us in the pub, and it's humbling, absolutely humbling. It really is.
All right. Well, before we get into the match review, again, guys, this is the most exciting news that we always have every season. Nick, run us through essentially our next trip heading to London. Fingers crossed, hanging out with the Chidge and the FanCast as well.
Correct. So December 28th through January 2nd, we are heading back. We're going to see Palace away on the 29th, and then see Southampton at home on New Year's Day. Should be a festive occasion. And yeah, we're hoping to meet up with Chidge as we have each of the previous 3 times that we've been over. Perhaps even do a live show if Chidge is sober enough to pull that off. We'll see.
If not, I'll get a stand-in, Nick. I'll get my double in.
Yeah. There is no stand-in for you, Chidge. You're one of a kind. So again, if you guys have any questions, DM us, email us, contact@londoninsbluepodcast.com. plenty of information up on our site, so LondonIsBluePodcast.com. You will actually register through XL Tours because that's the travel partner that we use. So, again, match tickets, hotel, plenty of other goodies. We will have a kind of full itinerary as we get closer to the actual trip. But very, 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 very excited to head back.
All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into the match review. Obviously, it was Liverpool at the weekend and a Premier League match. 2 matches against Liverpool in a very short time span. This one being at Stamford Bridge. Score, Blues 1, Reds 1. We actually did have some correct score predictions, Nick. Kind of surprising, but sure enough, there were 4, like-minded, just smart, nailed the predictions, just like you.
I've been 0 for 3 now the last 3 weeks, so
the tables have turned.
They have.
The tables have turned.
It was always going to be a short-lived run that I had. So Connor Beedling, Litteris, Frederick Berg, and then Ardale Hall, our good friend. So all with the 1-1 predictions. Just a massive week for those folks.
Keeping it moving, Dan, with the lineup this time. Chelsea sticking with the only thing Maurizio knows, the 4-3-3.
Yeah, we saw Kepa in between the sticks. We saw Alonso and Azpilicueta on the wings in defense. We saw Rudiger come back from a little injury, as well as Luis centered and paired together. Jorginho, Conte, and Kovacic in the midfield 3. And then who else but the main man, Eden Hazard, up top with Giroud. And then Willian Pedro does not make it back to fitness before the game, so we get substitutions from Victor Moses, Ross Barkley, and Alvaro Morata, while Fabregas, Cahill, Zappacosta, and Willie C. all sit on the bench.
Chidge, we haven't really gotten your take on the lineup this far, but, when you see that compared to the team that played midweek, I was pleasantly surprised to see Rudiger back. Other than that, I don't think I was, I guess Pedro is probably the big exception, but when you saw the lineup, you saw Liverpool's lineup, any initial thoughts, reactions?
Well, delighted that Rudiger was back, first of all. I think that he's I think he's massive for us already, but I think he's going to carry on getting even more massive. I think he's a hell of a player. Pedro, obviously, you could have had him in for Willian. I think Pedro, in a sense, suits Sarri's style a little bit better than Willian. I think Willian and Hazard are quite similar in what they try and do. But Pedro's a little bit more direct, and I think he's very much a Sarri type of player. But obviously he didn't make the cut because he was still injured. So it was exactly as I expected. I think the only other thing was I was actually really glad to see Giroud start instead of Morata. I think, I'm sure we'll get into this later. I don't think either of them are really, up to the mark in terms of what we need as a goal-scoring striker. But I think that Giroud's earned the right to start ahead of Morata, and Morata's going to have to pull his finger out and do something because he's in a horrible trough of form, I think, at the moment.
Well, we've got, for the most part, most of the holes plugged. We'll have to see as this kind of progresses. As we've looked at some stats throughout the first few matches this season, Chelsea, first time in a long time that not only have we not had 70+% possession, actually had less than 50% at 47. Low-ish on touches at 700 and passes only 559. Again, I think that just goes to show you how even these two teams were and how we approached the game. But overall, Chidge, we also want to come back to you for the atmosphere. Again, it was tense in the pubs where we were at. Just watching on TV, it was a very gritty affair. But from your kind of viewpoint, Matthew Harding, what was it like in the Bridge?
Well, it was brilliant, actually. It's the best I've seen for a Saturday league game for a long time. Maybe I don't know. Liverpool's a big grudge match for us, so that gets people's blood up, as it were. Also, it was a 5:30 kickoff, so people had more time to be in the pub, so maybe that had something to do with it. But it was the best atmosphere I've seen at the Bridge for a league game for quite a while. You hardly heard a peep out of the Scousers, of course, until they scored, when suddenly they were the greatest fans in the world. But hitherto, they'd been, they were absolutely drowned out by us, and everybody was singing. It was a real pleasure to be there. But it was a good match, It was tense. It was hard work, watching that. But really good to see. And I think you're right. I think they are two fairly evenly matched teams. So that anybody could have won that right up to the end. But no, main thing, fantastic atmosphere, real delight to be there on an evening like that.
I'm just trying to take it in again and just remember what it's like to beat the Bridge, and especially for such a huge match like this. I mean, I think the closest we've gotten to is probably Champions League, I'd say, against Atletico at home. That was fantastic because you both needed a result. But, I think just with Liverpool and it being a domestic team that you're taking on, there's that extra bit of energy in the stadium, but it looked absolutely electric. So again,
it's really hard to I'm just trying to think what you have to remind me, you said was that the Atletico Madrid,
Yep.
Was that the semi-final?
No. It was
a group
the group
game
stage match. Yeah.
There wasn't anything on that. I'm just trying to think what's the biggest match you might have seen. And the point is there is a huge difference. When there's something on it. I mean, we don't like Liverpool, clearly. They don't like us. And it was a big match, neither of us have been beaten in the league so far. And it was our first big test. So there was a lot on that in a sense. But yeah, big Champions League semi-final nights, that kind of thing, big cup matches. It's a very different atmosphere from your normal kind of run-of-the-mill, match. And I think the thing is that those that are there, because let's be honest, we get a fair few tourists these days, like all the big clubs. But on a match like the one on Saturday, there will still be a few kind of travellers there. But actually, they get drowned out by the proper hardcore fans who really know that it's about getting behind the team and making a lot of noise, and that's what we saw. It's fantastic. You can't beat it.
Love it. No, absolutely love it. All right, well, let's move into the 2 goals right off the bat. Chidge, Eden Hazard, 25th minute assist from Mateo Kovacic. Absolute acres down the middle, unmarked. Poor from Liverpool, but I can only imagine how the stadium erupted.
Well, I disagree about it being poor from Liverpool. I really do. I think it was just a beautifully worked goal. I mean, the build-up play, the interpassing between it was just absolutely clinical and ruthless. And I thought the way that Hazard just moved into that space on the left, and I had a great view of that from where I stand, and. He put that ball in the net, the only place he could put it in. I was talking to Love Sport this morning, and they were trying to say, oh, well, the keeper should have done better. But no way. He put it in the only place he could have put it to score. It was a fantastic goal and just proves, what great form Hazard's on at the moment. He's absolutely on fire at the moment, and amen to that.
I thought really quick, I thought the ball from Jorginho that freed up Kovacic was... probably the pass of the game. It was just one of those perfectly weighted kind of through balls, and it gave Kovacic all of the room to kind of make a really easy pass to Hazard. And I think, we gave Jorginho a little bit of stick last week for passing a lot, but nothing really that decisive against West Ham. But I thought yesterday it seemed the complete opposite.
Well, I think West Ham did a really good job on Jorginho, to be fair, last week, Nick. I know he kind of... I mean, we were crabby about it too on the FanCast, and, I me, I like direct football. I don't like passing for the sake of it. I think it's a bloody pointless waste of time. But I recognise how good Jorginho is and how fundamental he is to making the side tick. And I think so did Pellegrino, because he did very well with the midfield to really stifle any space to him. And he shut down the outlet. So that's what made him look like he was just passing around for the hell of it. He was trying to pass his way out of trouble, but they shut down the avenues, and that was really well played by them, I thought.
Well, either way, definitely no credit can be taken away for Eden on that finish. Absolutely snuck it in just inside the near post at the far corner. So fantastic from him. Not so fantastic is the 89th minute, Nick, when former Blue Daniel Sturridge just pulled something quite literally out of his ass. Assist Xherdan Shaqiri.
So, I mean, to be fair, it was a great goal. I mean, it was a great hit. I mean, if you're asking me if he meant it, I don't know. I've seen him try that shot a couple of different times over the last, he doesn't play a ton for Liverpool, but over the last few years, I've seen him try that kind of long range top corner shot, and most of the time it ends up in the 15th row. So, credit to him for hitting it. It was a beautiful goal, but, it was frustrating at that point because Shaqiri should have scored on one of the previous, kind of runs that Liverpool had, and they were putting the pressure on late. So, who knows, when that goal was going to come. But I mean, it just, of course, Dan, it had to be our former player coming back to haunt us, because that seems to happen all the time. Yeah,
of course, it's a great narrative element. I do think I enjoyed the fact that Shaqiri missing, conjured up a litany of Swiss Miss tweets, which I found quite humorous. But I think the question I would have, and I know that a couple people hit us up with it, Brandon, could Kepa, I don't think he could have, but people ask us, and we have a duty and responsibility to the listeners to ask the question of our goalkeeper, of our goalkeeping union card carrying member, Brandon Busby. Could Kepa have done better on the opportunity for that shot?
You're complicit by asking. You know that, right? No, look.
I plead the fifth.
Look, here's the thing that pisses me off the most is because Courtois would have saved it, right? He's 4 inches taller, 5 inches taller. No, Kepa, you all saw the replays. It literally went right over his hands and under the crossbar. The only way he's saving that is if he's 2 inches taller, and he's not. So could he have done better? No. The only way we could have done better is preventing the shot, but let's be honest. Did Sturridge mean it? Yes. Did he think it was going in? No. Right? That's just the way it is. So I think that Kepa couldn't have done more. That is just a limitation you get with him, is that maybe... high shots will always be a bit of a weakness. Look at how well he did to get low in that near post save on Mane in the first half. And let's talk about his distribution with his feet all game that really kept Chelsea in control of possession and not getting us in bad situations. So again, I ramble a little bit, but that's how I feel kind of on it.
The passion of the goalkeeper.
It's there. It's alive. All right. Well, Chidgey, most people would have taken a draw from this match after the West Ham performance last weekend, but with 2 strong showings against Liverpool in only a few days, how confident are you that this team can go toe-to-toe with any team in the league this season?
Well, I think it was huge. I mean, let's not be under no illusion here. Wednesday's match was one thing. At the end of the day, it was effectively 2 B teams against each other. I think that Sarri actually played a relatively strong side. A little bit alarming that he's not prepared to play any of the youth in these matches, but that's a topic for another day, I suspect. But we were worried. A lot of us were worried that actually Liverpool, with the start that they've made, and clearly beginning to gel as a side and looking a very potent force up front, and also being very adept at taking apart possession-based sides. Look at what they did to City last year, for example. So we were worried that we might be on the end of one yesterday. And the fact is that we probably should have won that match. I agree, there were chances at either end. It could have gone either way, but we did enough to win that. If Hazard scores that goal from the breakaway free kick, it's 2-0. It's a different game, isn't it? So I think, and the other interesting thing I thought was that a lot of people were saying around yesterday that it actually looked a bit Conte-esque at times. And I thought that Chelsea, did defend quite deep in the second half. I don't like to see that, but I can see why they were doing it. They were trying to, catch Liverpool on the break, which they did a few times. The bottom line is that we could have won that. Arguably, we should have won that. And this is the team that everybody's raving about. And we're a team very much a work in progress. Sarri's had just 2 or 3 months to try and gel this side together. So I think it bodes really, really, really well. I think that we're going to be, competing against anybody in this league. I now look at playing City, and I'm less worried about that than I might have been at the beginning of the season. So I think already Sarri's, churning out a pretty decent side here, and it's beginning to work. Having said that, it's still early days. Anything could happen, and I still think we've got the odd dodgy performance in us, and we could probably lose to anybody as much as we can beat anybody. But I'm really, really encouraged having seen that yesterday. I really am, because I was worried about that, and I thought, as I said, we should and could have won that.
Nick, you can jump in on this too. Just kind of the way the game played out with everything. Obviously, that's why we play the games, right? On paper, Chelsea should have lost. But when you play the game, I was thrilled at the desire and commitment Chelsea had to go toe-to-toe. Last season, I think Conte would have been even more reserved and a little bit more negative from the beginning. Obviously, Chelsea giving up over 50% possession kind of trends toward that, like Chidge said. but I thought it was significantly much more of a brave performance than what we've seen in the past couple years.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, I think my prediction for the game before the game on Wednesday was that we'd lose 1-3 in the league. So I was really happy with the performance. I thought, when we were on the back foot a little bit, we found a way to regain control. And there were a couple of moments where it almost felt like the team was going through a reset where, we were under it a little bit. And, you would see David Luiz and Jorginho and kind of the heart of our midfield pass the ball around a little bit just to let everyone have a break and reset and get back into the game. And I think those moments were huge. I mean, make no mistake about it, this was a huge match. I think the rest of the league, everyone was watching, to see how good Chelsea was, how good Liverpool was, and because we're also we haven't played super well against them in a couple of years. I know that we won last year at the end when things were pretty dour for our squad, but it just felt like a big match, and I was really proud of the heart and the fight that the team showed. And to me, I think if Eden Hazard buries that kind of one-on-one with Alisson, or Willian can somehow bring down the kind of over the top ball that he kind of shot right into Alisson's face, then we could be talking about a different result. But all in all, Dan, I feel really good about this, kind of the progress that we've seen. And we've said this multiple times, and I'll let Dan give his take, but to me, this is month 2 of Sarri. We haven't even completed almost, I think it's been about 2 full months of his, system being implemented. Jurgen Klopp's had 3.5, 4 years, and I didn't tell a huge amount of difference between the two yesterday, and I think that's a credit to Maurizio Sarri.
Well, I think the thing, and we kind of talked about, maybe the shots that we missed, or how the midfield, worked yesterday. But I think the biggest point of credit probably goes to the defense for keeping us in the game. The Rudiger run back to stop the Salah goal after kind of there was a little positional challenge there with Luis with the goal line clearance. I mean, they came up so huge with Alonso and kind of really defending either 2-on-1, 1-on-1. Probably one of his best defensive performances in a game. We often look at him as a liability, but might have been our strongest individual defender yesterday. I generally think that this game could have been a massive result for Liverpool, but defensively, we were probably the most, well performing out of any of the matches we've seen in Sarri, and the offense was working well. And I think that's just showing us that the platform or the way that we're going to continue to win matches is being, appropriately coached into the team in a way where we can execute it on a regular basis. And if we can win or draw in these situations where maybe we were concerned that we would lose in a pretty poor way, that's a good thing to look to the future, Brandon.
There's a lot to look forward to, obviously. Matthew on Patreon was saying he was happy/fortunate to gain a point. Normally a game-tying 89th minute goal would be devastating, but that stomach-churning feeling never seemed to rise. Perhaps the stunning goal subdued the feeling of that overall feel of the game, caused him, to be fortunate for that point. I mean, if we were going to tie Liverpool, doing so with that shot is something I can't be upset by. I mean, wow, if we concede 2 points, a goal like that is on to simply shrug the shoulders and tip the cap. So that's kind of, his take on it. I don't know, Chidge. It was there.
It's like being kicked in the nuts really hard. I mean, we left and it felt like a loss. The disappointment was palpable. Because we knew that we, as I said, we could and should have won that. You reflect a bit after a while, and then you see the wood for the trees, as it were. But in that moment when you're leaving, I can guarantee you, Matthew, there was nobody leaving that stadium who was shrugging their shoulders, saying, "Oh well, it was a good goal." People were pissed off, because we got so close. Just to pick up on what Dan was saying as well, Brandon, which I thought was absolutely spot on. I think that performance, particularly by the defence and defensively, really was massive, because that's answered a lot of questions. As I said, a lot of talk before this match was the way that, how Liverpool were going to take us apart and exploit our lack of pace and exploit our lack of discipline and exploit the gaps. None of that happened. And yet, they created chances. I get it. They could have scored more. I get it. And we cleared 2 off the line. But the point is, we cleared 2 off the line. I thought Luiz and Rudiger were imperious in defence. And I agree with Dan. I thought Alonso had his best defensive game for ages. Salah, the wonder kid, apparently he's better than Hazard. He got taken off. He looked like the player that we signed that I saw playing for Chelsea and looking like absolute shit. So, defensively, I thought that was massive and it answered questions. It really did.
Yeah, their best player was subbed off, and then their captain was subbed off, and then their vice captain was subbed off. Not a great day on that front, where our best player scored, a goal, could have had more, but that's a different debate. But then, our captain, Aspie, locked it down. It just, look, different performances. Obviously, their bench was deep enough to get them the result, but it surely was not the players that they're supposed to be relying on. And speaking of that, Dan, Liverpool signed Fabinho and Naby Keita, kind of. I know he was signed the year before. Anyways, this summer to reinforce their midfield, but I really thought their midfield was average with Milner, Henderson, Wijnaldum. If maybe not average isn't the right word. They were industrious, right? They're not overperforming. They're just there to kind of get in the way to let their front 3 do whatever they need to do. But on the flip side, I thought Jorginho, Kanté, and Kovacic were fantastic, especially, like you said, the productivity, the final ball, the end piece was there for me. Obviously when the subs came in, that's where it started to fall off. So specifically starting with Kovacic, I'm worried. Do you think he's still not fully fit to finish a game, or does Sarri just want fresh legs maybe to chase their midfielders around?
Well, I think first we do have to compliment Liverpool's midfield and having, one of the biggest, on-pitch assholes in Jordan Henderson playing, with the amount of complaining and, just jawing off that he does. It's, always a pleasure to see him kind of taken to task by anyone. I do think that, it was a look at an opportunity to try to refresh legs. There's a lot of competitions coming up. Now we're going to have to play, Derby and Frank Lampard and invite them back to Stamford Bridge. We, have Europa League matches, regular Premier League matches. So there's enough competitions where if you can give someone, 15, 20 minutes to rest, put someone with fresh legs on, being a Barkley or another player to take that load off is what you hope for. Unfortunate for Barkley, when he comes on, he does, kind of give up the pass that, eventually leads to Sturridge's goal. So, but I think that, you are looking at the fact that the depth is going to be the challenge for us, is that we have, there's a lot of positions where if you go to the next player up, it's not a like-for-like substitution. We've talked about it, unfortunately for several years, Nick, but there's no second starting 11 necessarily within our squad. There are very few positions where, maybe a Christensen for Luiz or Rudiger gives you, a similar level of talent, maybe different opportunities to play. But it's not across the pitch, and there's a lot of work that's going to continue to need to be done in January and next summer as you look to bring in new players, but also kind of find players within the academy who already belong to Chelsea to make that addition.
So I agree with you. I don't think they're, if the question is do we have like a like-for-like replacement for Kovacic? No. We were in our text group, and Chage, I want your opinion on this as well, but I felt like before he came off, he was probably my man of the match. I thought he was unbelievable in the first 60 or so minutes, and not only with the energy and, all of the range of passing, but I thought just he might be our bastard. Every team needs a bastard. We had it with Diego. Previously I think David Luiz has kind of been a bastard. But we need someone with a little bit of dog in him. And I thought that he, for us, yesterday had that, attacking, fighting spirit. And he was just simply everywhere on the pitch. I was so impressed. And so our midfield just overwhelmed their midfield. And I actually was very surprised that Milner and Henderson were in the same midfield together. And it felt very much like Jurgen Klopp was playing a little bit defensive there. which I think has to probably go down to Maurizio Sarri and his system and knowing kind of the threat that our midfield possesses. So. Chidge, I don't know what you think about the midfield, but it felt to me like Kovacic was just incredible yesterday.
I agree with that, Nick. I thought that was the best collective performance by Jorginho, Kovacic, and Kante that we've seen this season. I think it's really interesting, isn't it, when we played a team that actually were prepared to come and have a go at us, which actually I don't think Liverpool were necessarily defensive. I think that they... we played very well. They found it hard, really, but they were certainly out there to try and get a result. And I just thought you saw a very different Kante. I mean, previously we've seen Kante with acres of space or being blocked out by a 10-man defence. And he doesn't really know what to do, but he seemed to have much more... we seemed to be much more comfortable in the fact that he was having to make tackles and close people down. So it was a bit more kind of normal for him in that sense. And I think you saw a good performance as a result. I think it's really interesting, actually, isn't it? Because I thought, you're right, I think our midfield bossed that game for much of it. But actually what I thought was interesting was that our substitutions didn't work. We brought on Barkley. Very difficult for him to come into a game like that and get up to the pace of it. And I think that's why you saw him making a couple of mistakes. I mean, arguably... he gave the ball away initially, didn't he, for Sturridge's goal. But Moses, again... doesn't look like a player good enough really to play in that position for Chelsea. And Morata again, didn't look like a player good enough to be a striker for Chelsea. So, the team that he put out there was really, really good, played really, really well. But I think the substitutions were a bit lacking.
What do you think about the N'Golo Kante discussion that's happening right now? I can't remember what the FanCast said about,
You think I can, Brandon? I don't even listen to the I don't even listen to the bloody show,
Perfect. This is even better. This will be a fresh take then. It's not. You won't be influenced.
It's a complicated argument, and I don't think there's any easy solution. The reality is that yes, Kante is without doubt the best defensive midfield player in that kind of Makelele position in the world. But we don't play like that anymore. That's not how Sarri wants to play. Sarri wants to play with a quarterback, and the quarterback is Jorginho, and that is fundamental to how he wants us to play. And let's be frank, it's worked pretty well. I think it's a shame in a sense, but it's like comparing apples with oranges. If we were playing 4-2-3-1, and you had Kante, playing in the defensive midfield role and Jorginho had come in to swap him directly, then you would ask questions. But that's not what's happened. And I remember talking to Jason Cundy really early on in the season about this. And he was adamant that actually for example, Liam, we had Liam on the show last week, and he wrote a really excellent piece about the fact that he felt that Kante was being asked to play a Frank Lampard role or an impersonation of Frank Lampard, but without any of the goal-scoring ability. I think that's not entirely true. I agree with Jason Cundy, which is, he's being asked to kind of win the ball high up the pitch. So I think that Kante's fundamental to the high press. I think the downside of it is that for some reason or other, he tends to have been the spare man in space. And he's, against West Ham, he missed a header. He did a pretty poor shot over the bar. And that's not what his strengths are. But maybe we should be looking at others, like the Williams of this world, who should be getting into the right position to be finishing stuff off. And I think actually against West Ham, like I was saying earlier on in the show, that's where we missed Pedro. Pedro, I think if Pedro's the guy that finds that space, is the kind of the free man rather than Kante, then you see a different result. And maybe if Pedro had been playing, that's what we would have seen. But, get over it, people. Kante's going to be in that position for as long as he wants. Jorginho's going to be in his position for as long as he wants, because that's what Sarri wants. And trust Sarri to make Kante adapt to that position. He's a world-class player. I've got no problems with him being able to do that.
Well, and this is where, really quick, we were talking about this last week, and I think this is where we were hoping that maybe Kovacic was a little bit more of a goal scorer than he is, right? Because, I personally feel like anytime you can have N'Golo Kante on the field, and especially as you referenced, Chage, that with the high press that at times Chelsea have employed this year, and I'm sure they will employ more as the system becomes more comfortable for the entire team, is N'Golo Kante has a steadiness and an ability to run a marathon each game without apparently getting tired, which is incredible. Whereas Willian slows down about the 60th, 70th minute if he starts. And Willian should be the guy, just with his athletic ability and talent to, really enjoy the high press. I mean, I think, the odds that Willian gets a ball and, any sort of space near the 18-yard box and can do something with it would excite me if I was him. But it doesn't seem like he's necessarily going that distance or above and beyond to make sure that he's one of the people pressing. So N'Golo Kante at times yesterday was higher up the pitch than Willian was. And to me, that just shows, either a lack of fitness in one way, or that Sarri just trusts N'Golo Kante to do what he is naturally born to do, which is win the ball back. And, to be frank, and I want Dan's POV on this too, but I thought that N'Golo Kante had 3 critical passes yesterday, one to Hazard in space, and then 2 others that were potentially going to set up goals. And to me, if we can get that level of production from him, where he's on a break and can play a pass to someone who can really do something with the ball, i.e. a Willian or a Hazard or, God willing, a striker on our team, then we're going to be gold.
But I mean, Nick, Kante can do this. Remember the goal he scored against Man United?
Yes, perfectly. Yes.
What a superb goal that was. Didn't he finish that with aplomb?
He did. And it's not to say he can't shoot. It's just that if we even get like a few assists from him in that higher up role, then I think this whole thing is going to flow better. Right now, we're overly reliant on one guy to score our goals because our strikers and our Willian are not turning up.
Absolutely right. And I think herein lies the bigger problem. I don't think the problem is with our midfield. The midfield is going to be like it is. This is not a midfield that has Frank Lampard in it or even Michael Essien. It's a different midfield. These guys are not going to score us a hatful of goals. So that actually, as you rightly say, that puts the pressure far more on Hazard and Willian/Pedro and whoever we've got up front. And that is, for me, the problem that we have. I was thinking during that game, watching it, thinking, this is all looking pretty good, guys. But what would we be like if we had an Aguero or a Lewandowski, a proper goal-scoring pig? The number of times I saw Giroud, who I love to pieces, I absolutely love the man, but he will lay the ball off rather than having a pop unless he's got a clear sight of goal. Aguero wouldn't do that. Aguero would get the ball, find space, shoots on sight. If we had a striker like that, we would be unbeatable, I tell you. I mean, it would really make a difference, and I don't think we've got strikers who can do that.
It's the biggest gulf in a difference between us versus City versus Liverpool, is that we're lacking in that department. And I think until we come January or come summer, it's going to be the thing that keeps us from I think challenging for the title versus kind of being a top 4 contender. Without having someone that can chip in that 20 plus goal to give Hazard a little additional freedom, to allow Kante to be his best self, and to do that, not with the pressure of having to score a goal, but with the added bonus of if he does score one, that we're all going to love it, and hopefully it's a header that he can finish off next time. That would be great, but we need that person in front of goal in that striker position that wants to take the challenge on of scoring and is able to stand up to the challenges and can be a great partner to Hazard and to whoever we put on the right flank. Because I think the hot or cold element or the punch card element of Willian and Pedro, it doesn't mean that you have to rotate them, that you may get lucky, and hopefully Sarri gets lucky enough where he's picking the right one on the right day. But the consistency element is going to be another problem for our attack.
I think the other worry, Dan, I mean, we've talked a lot about this on the FanCast, and there's a temptation to say, well, look, if the strikers aren't scoring goals, then maybe play Hazard, Willian and Pedro perhaps more centrally, which is something he did at Barcelona. And I remember the game we played against Barcelona when we played the false number 9, and I remember Willian having the best game of the season for him in that game. He was superb. So I think it could work. I think the trouble is in English football, we're very, very wedded to having a big striker up front. Because actually this is one of the things that Giroud does particularly well. He occupies a defender or two and provides more space for the likes of Willian and Hazard, and I can understand that. But it would be really interesting to see Sarri just give it a go. While they're hopelessly out of form and not scoring goals, play Hazard, Pedro and Willian together and see what happens.
Well, funny enough you bring that up because Sarri said in his post-match press conference he isn't worried about his striking options, nor is he interested in playing with a false nine. He seems to be pretty confident that we will have 3 or 4 players with double-digit goals by the end of the season. He's also now started, Nick, a live countdown of Eden Hazard getting 40 goals. And as he put it at this end of the match, hey, only 33 more to go. Interesting stake in the ground from Maurizio. But are you confident that we're going to have 3 or 4 players with double-digit goals, one of them being Eden on 40?
I mean, and I'm not. If we had... Even if Giroud was hitting one every other game, then I would feel okay, But then you're really. I think Pedro will probably get there if he is okay and is able to come back in a decent amount of time. But then you'd be relying on Willian, who's never hit double-digit goals in a season, and the combination of Olivier Giroud or Alvaro Morata, who both haven't really done anything this season. In terms of goal scoring, to be the second and third, maybe fourth option to have double-digit goals. Like, I don't know if anyone else is super confident in that, but like beyond Pedro and Hazard, I don't think that's plausible. Maybe Marcus Alonso, who knows?
I think, what, I don't think a lot of people obviously are confident right now because it's not happening. Dan, kind of interesting from Shane here on Patreon asking, is anyone else bothered by the constant comments from coaches about what Eden Hazard should and shouldn't be capable of? I mean, who is Sarri to decide what Eden should be as a player? What if Eden would have to change who he was as a person psychologically, emotionally in order to reach these expectations? What if this player that we have is the best Eden? Can we deal with that?
So I think it's a good shout, but I actually think what's happening is you're getting, I think, some wonderful man management from Sarri, who's doing a great job of both praising Eden in the right moments, but setting benchmarks for where he feels like the player could achieve. It's similar to how all of us have worked for someone or work at a job where we report to someone, and if you do a good job, the hope or the expectation is you can either replicate that or you can unlock or achieve a different level. And I think what we're starting to see different from prior seasons is Eden's off to the races. He's leading the Premier League in goals at the moment and goals scored. And I think that's exciting. And I think it's great for a manager to praise him appropriately in the press, to thank him for the contributions, but also to say, hey, I've got an idea of where he can achieve and what he can do. And I think the best thing that we can do for Eden in that regard is to eventually get someone who can support him appropriately up front, because I am not confident that Morata and Giroud for an entire season is going to help us get the best out of Eden Hazard. You look at Pedro as the second top goal scorer for us in the league with 3, and then it's Alonso, Willian, Jorginho, Conte, and Morata with 1 goal apiece. If we're talking about getting multiple goal scorers to 10 plus, that's going to be a pretty lofty challenge. And I don't necessarily know if one of those 3 or 4 players exists on the roster today. It's
kind of weird to me, Chidge, like Dan said, to me, it's like, well, that's kind of the manager's responsibility, is to kind of tell the player what they can achieve and maybe some milestones that they should look to try to hit. But to me, I guess I understand Shane's point if Maurizio was telling him to go play left back. But to me, he's an attacker. He's there to produce and score goals realistically.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, I think, him saying that, to be honest. But, I mean, we had a really interesting chat about his press conference on the Love Sports show on Friday. And when he was basically saying that he thinks he's 75-80% there. And basically when he was pushed, he was saying, well, Hazard could do more in training, and I got the hump about that and said, well, I don't give a shit what he does in training, it's what it does on the pitch that counts for me. And Jonathan was very interesting about that, and he said, well, actually, because I said, well, what if what about an actor? It's not about the dress rehearsal, it's about the performance. And actually Jonathan said, well, actually, no. He said, you have to be professional, and in the rehearsals and everything else, it's a professional courtesy to your fellow actors to put in 100%, even if it's a rehearsal. And I thought, well, actually, that was quite a good point. About the the getting 40 goals, I think that's just nuts. I mean, I could see Hazard getting 20. I think he's more than capable of doing that. But the reality is, when Sarri says 3 or 4 players with double digits, you know, in a really great team, I mean, we've had it before. You know, your top strikers, you want your top striker getting a minimum of 20 goals a season, all right? And then we had Frank Lampard, who was getting 15 to 20 nearly every season. We had JT, who was weighing in with 5 to 10 goals a season. So, yeah, it was spread around a bit, but you had 2 or 3 players that were getting nearly 20 goals. You know, that's what you need. And, I mean, if you've got Hazard, Willian, Pedro, Giroud, Morata as your key goal scorers. Giroud, yeah, I can see him getting 10, but yeah, I mean, I can see Giroud getting 10. Morata, I think, is more than capable of doing that. I mean, he got 11 goals in 10 games at the start of last season, so we know he can do it. It's just a question of will he ever get his mojo back. Willian, he'd struggle to get 10 in my book. And Pedro, I mean, again, you know, there's nobody there other than Hazard that I can see getting us nearly 20 goals a season, let alone double figures. So I think that needs to be looked at.
All right. Well, before we get too far ahead into January, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Obviously, open it up. Now, if you guys have any other additional thoughts or comments that we maybe have missed that you want to revisit, Chidge, anything that you want to pull out that we maybe didn't talk about already?
No, I'll save that for tomorrow night, mate, obviously. Ooh. No, I'm only pulling it.
Nice. Another plug. I love it. I love it.
Tune in, folks. Tune in, folks. No, look,
MIXLR.
Listen, all I would say is that... reiterate, we are not the perfect side yet. We are very much a work in progress. I think it's absolutely right that Sarri is being, slowly catchy monkey in a way. I mean, and I think he's right to kind of keep his faith in who he's got at the moment. The only thing that I'm confused by, really, I mean, we all knew beforehand that Sarri likes to pick the same team every match. I mean, this is what he did at Napoli, but I just think the Carabao Cup, I mean, okay, I know it was against Liverpool and, you don't want to lose there, obviously, but I'm a bit disappointed that the likes of Ampadu and Hudson-Odoi didn't get a chance. I really am, because I think Hudson-Odoi particularly, needs to be tested on a bigger stage. We need to see what he can do. I think we know what Ampadu can do. He looks a hell of a player. And, of course, poor old Loftus-Cheek, who was injured, who I really fear for his Chelsea future, but... That's the only thing I would say, other than what we can already see is happening, that I would like to see changed.
Dan, anything else?
No, credit to Marcus Alonso for a great performance. I think he stuffed out Salah pretty well, and we spent a lot of time talking about attack. But again, I think one of the best defensive performances we've seen from this side this season, and I think provides a good blueprint for how we'll continue to play defensively moving forward.
Absolutely. We didn't even talk about it. That's my bad. We should have. I mean, Aspie was barely involved in this match because Liverpool quite clearly attacked Alonso all day and went down his side all day, and him and Rudiger and David Luiz dealt with it like absolute professionals. So for those of you who say Marcus Alonso can't defend, I guess you can put that in your pipe and smoke it. What about you, Nick?
Feisty Brandon's back. I love it.
I've got my Alonso kit. I got to wear it and be proud.
You do. Yeah, the only thing I would say is just around the atmosphere of the team right now is, like, even in a slightly disappointing draw, it was still really great to see, our guys, holding their heads high after a match like that. And, I think Maurizio Sarri's kind of seems like a warm, kind of lovable figure. At least that's the figure he cuts in public, and I think that has all the difference in the world compared to kind of the end of the Antonio Conte reign, which seemed really dour and negative. So it just is nice to see this team kind of gelling and looking like they're enjoying their jobs, which they're being paid millions of pounds to do that, and we just hope to see a smile every once in a while. I think that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. All right, Dan, your time to shine. Finally, man of the match poll.
Yeah, no joking, humorous options for this week. We kept it pretty professional. Above board, Hazard, Kovacic, Luis, and Rudiger. Hazard wins with 57% of the vote, followed very closely by Luis with 17%. Rudiger with 14%, and your boy Nicholas Kovacic with 12%.
Very close behind, yeah. All right. Well, as the table stands, Chelsea are in third place, 2 points off the top, who sit Man City, level on points with Liverpool on 19. Tottenham Spurs jumping up to 4th on 15 points. Arsenal up to 15 points in 5th. And Watford sticking it to the top 6 on 13 points. If you can't scroll far enough, United are currently in 10th, which is unfortunately very reminiscent to a few seasons ago for our beloved Chelsea. But, keep your eye on that and see how it goes. It will surely be one for the tabloids all season. So anyways, we're going to wrap up this episode. Don't worry, we are coming back with the full crew in part 2 for our next episode this week. Going to be covering a ton of your social media questions, as well as we have a double match preview, MOL Vidi in Hungary, as well as Southampton. Chidge, are you more excited for a Europa League midweek match or the Saints away this coming week? Give a quick tease.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm very excited about Mol Vidi on Thursday because I will be sitting with Dan Silver in the West Lower, and it's a European night and it's a midweek game. I mean, you just gotta love that, Normally, Southampton away is my favourite away of the season because, of course, I live some kind of 15 minutes up the road from Southampton, so I always find it hilarious that one of the few away games I go to is actually very near where I live. Sadly, I'm not going this Sunday because I just was stupid about trying to get a ticket, and then I also know that the trains are screwed too, which is going to make it hard to get in and out. And now I've been asked to co-present the breakfast show at Love Sport next Sunday with, would you believe, not only the prior kind of British 400-metre Olympic runner Ewan Thomas, but he's also a Southampton fan. So I shall be sticking knives into him for 4 hours on Sunday morning.
What a better morning. What a way to start your day off.
Indeed. But I won't be going to the game, so I should be watching it in the pub in Victoria, I think. It's a great away. It's a great away. If you ever get the chance to go to Southampton away, a lot of fun. Everybody loves it. Everybody goes to the same pub. We take it over. Everybody gets absolutely hammered. It's one of the favourite away trips. It really is.
Awesome. All right. Well, there's your tease. There's your taste test for part 2. So make sure you listen on. Again, Chidge, thanks for joining us as always. It is fantastic. And we'll be back with another pod later this week. Until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.